This is 15-Minute Fundamentals, where we interview crypto projects' core contributors and together walk through the charts available on Token Terminal. Morpho is a lending pool optimizer that operates a peer-to-peer layer built on top of lending pools such as Compound and Aave. In our previous episode with Morpho, we covered the basics of the protocol, and this time we cover the latest updates with a focus on the launch of Morpho-Aave V3 and also discuss an extremely interesting topic of what Morpho is doing in terms of security internally. Tune in to learn about the new features that come with Morpho-Aave V3 and also the details behind Morpho's smart contract development process and how the team is ensuring technical, operational, and economic safety of the protocol. Hello, Merlin. Welcome to 15-Minute Fundamentals. It's great to have you on.
Yeah, thank you. It's great to be here as well.
Now, I had a chance to speak with your colleague Paul about 3-4 months ago about the basics of Morpho. And for this episode, we have two pretty exciting topics. So the launch of Morpho-Aave V3 and then a bit of your internal security processes. But before we dive into those, it would be great if you can give us just a quick update on what have been the biggest milestones for the last few months. And especially from the perspective of, if we look at your charts, all metrics are trending up very nicely. So what's been driving that?
Yeah. So the biggest milestone is that we crossed 500 million in total value deposited on the protocol. And now I think it's around 650 million, something like that. And so we are super excited about that. Huge growth. I think Paul mentioned that we had a huge focus on growth and BD at the time, and we're still continuing to try to create new integration. So we have been integrated by InstantApp, DeFi Saver, and more recently by Yearn. And so we're super excited about that. And I think those are the biggest milestones of the past few months.
Yeah, that's great. And would you say that these integrations have been the biggest driver behind the traction you've been seeing?
Yeah, I think the first integration was the hardest. I think once we had InstantApp, it paved the way to other integrators to trust Morpho first, because when you want to integrate a new protocol, you want to be sure that it's a safe place. And because we launched in last summer, it was quite a recent protocol, so integrators were just caring about the safety of their own protocol. And I think that's explained the small growth we had at the very beginning, and now as trust has been built over the last month, it's sharply increasing.
Okay, awesome. And you just put out a big launch, Morpho-Aave V3. Would be awesome if you could just give us a quick overview of what this is that you've been building heads down for the past few months.
Yeah, Aave V3 is a bit different from the V2. So in terms of interface, it's basically the same, but you have lots of new features like E-mode, isolation mode, siloed borrowing. Also, you have new risk parameters like supply and borrow caps. And all those parameters are great for users, but also for instance, for the caps, it can bring some new constraints to the Morpho protocol. And so we did a lot of research to still be able to create a Morpho on top of Aave V3 while those constraints are there.
Got it. And now with Morpho-Aave V3, what are the main features that you introduced?
With Aave V3, we introduced some new features. The first one is the permit to developed by Uniswap that we tweak a little bit for our needs. And this is a great feature because basically it's like a general approval. So even if a token is not implementing permit, basically you could have the same UX as a token with a permit function implemented. And so people on Morpho, if they swap on Uniswap just right before, they will be able just to sign a message on Morpho protocol to allow the Morpho protocol to spend their tokens. So it's a great improvement in terms of UX for EOAs. And I'm super excited about that. And there's a network effect. I mean, if you're using Morpho and then Uniswap, you already have that allowance on the permit to contract. And so you'll be able to sign directly on Uniswap and use Uniswap. So it's great. That's the first feature. We have also account management. So account management is you can allow someone else to manage your position. So to borrow on your behalf, to withdraw on your behalf. So this is new, and it was not possible on the first version of Morpho. So I think it will really ease integrators, or if you want to migrate your position from one protocol to the other, to be very cool. we have that. Also, Aave V3 is introducing e-mode. So with Morpho, what you can do is deploy a new Morpho instance for a specific e-mode. So this is great. If you want Morpho in the general mode, then you can deploy it. If you want Morpho for the stablecoin e-mode, you can deploy it. If you want Morpho for the if e-mode, then you can deploy it. So you can have like multiple instances that are really focused on one particular thing and do it in a really, really efficient way. So that's for the e-mode. And also it's not a feature, but it's like a new thing that we are introducing, like a new data structure, which is fairer for users using logarithmic buckets. And so basically, if you matched with some users, you'll be matched with user that has approximately the same size as you. So that means like small account can be matched with small accounts too, and bigger accounts will be matched with big accounts. In terms of efficiency, it's the same as the previous data structure, but in terms of fairness, it's way better.
Okay, wow, especially on the first 2 points there, like really removing some unnecessary friction that like crypto has. So those are great features.
Yeah, it's a first step, but we're just waiting for account abstraction to be introduced and spread in the DeFi space. And I think this will be like the real paradigm shift. Here, we're just introducing new features to improve a bit, but it's not a 10x improvement. That I think will be through account abstraction.
Okay, and then as one of the biggest updates to Aave V3 was the introduction of supply and borrow caps, how did those affect Morpho?
So the supply cap, if it's reached, supplier cannot supply on Morpho. But if you're a Morpho user, sometimes if you want to repay your debt, it can trigger a supply on the pool. And so it would prevent directly to someone to repay its debt on Morpho. So what we did is create what we called internally the idle supply. So instead of supplying on the pool, we'll just keep the supply idle in the Morpho protocol, waiting for someone else to either match this liquidity, or once the cap is not reached anymore, then we'll be able to supply it on the pool. So that's for the supply cap. Then there's a borrow cap, which is a bit more annoying for the user, because if there's a borrow cap, you cannot sometimes for a withdrawal on Morpho will trigger a borrow on the pool, and it would be stuck by the cap. And it's an issue for the liquidation process, because the liquidation process on Morpho is using this withdrawal feature on the pool, and it would prevent liquidation of some users on Morpho. So what we did is we split users between two types of suppliers, so suppliers only and collateral or borrowers users. And the difference is, if you're a supplier of collateral, then your liquidity is put on the pool, so that if you borrow and your position becomes unhealthy, then we'll still be able to liquidate your position. So we still have that possibility of liquidating every users on Morpho, which is super important for the safety of the protocol and if you want to avoid bad debt, obviously. And you have the other types of supplier, which is the supplier only. So you can't use your supply to borrow against that supply, but you can be meshed on that supply, like you could on Morpho V1, and you can enjoy better rates.
Okay, that's super interesting. Now, am I correct in saying that you've basically built a workaround for the set supply and borrow caps on Aave so that via Morpho, they're basically increased?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the UX, I would say, is a bit hurt by that, but we think that it's greatly make the protocol safer against those new risk parameters.
Got it. That's super interesting. Now, a bit more of a technical question. What are the most relevant and important smart contracts on Morpho-Aave V3 and what do they do?
So Morpho-Aave V3 is basically the same as Morpho V1 in terms of architecture. So what I want to say by that is, like, we have the Morpho contract, which has some logic, which is delegating code to a position manager. And the position manager is responsible to do the logic that is related to the peer-to-peer. So do we need to withdraw from the pool? Do we need to match users or to unmatch users? So this is handled by the position manager. And the position manager is using directly the matching engine. And in the matching engine, it's where we'll do like, okay, we need to match like 10 users to fill this amount of liquidity. And so we'll go into the data structure and search for the user to be matched first, etc., and then the second and the third until the liquidity is met. So you have this matching engine that is also using the data structure which is a completely new data structure that we're using on Aave V3. So this is the main architecture.
Thank you for that great overview. And let's move on to security, because the main reason we're actually sitting here right now is you put out a tweet where one of your auditors asked you why you're not speaking too much about the security work you do internally. So I thought that, you know what, let's speak about it. But before we go into what you're doing internally and how, I would love to hear how you are generally thinking about what security means in crypto and why it's so important.
Yeah, so first security is like you want your user to trust your protocol. I mean, in DeFi to deposit your money, obviously, and you want that base continue using it over time. So if you have just one incident, then you lose trust, and so you lose users. So you need to make sure that nothing happens. And this is really important for your protocol, but also for DeFi, because when you see all those hacks that are happening in the space, it's just bad advertisement for the outside world. I think it's like a responsibility for like core developers, but also like it's a responsibility for the entire sector to have like a safe place where people can just put their money at work, etc., but without caring about like will I see my money again in the future. So it's really important to have like secure protocols. And at Morpho, we think that it should be the main focus of every team in the space.
I agree with you 100%. Now, as you do focus a lot on security internally, at a high level, what are you doing in practice? And then more specifically, what does your process for developing new contracts look like?
I think it's nothing is special, I would say, at Morpho. We are like engineers, like just caring a lot about what we are doing and we want to do things right. So basically, we are just developing the protocol, doing a lot of tests. We are testing everything. So unit tests, integration tests, environment tests. We also have like someone who's doing like formal proving internally using like Y3 and etc. tool. So it's really helpful to, for instance, you have a math library that you want to prove everything. So here at Morpho Labs, we are able to do that as well for like the data structure, and we are extending that to all our contracts. So this is a really powerful thing that we have internally. So beside the test, we have like internal reviews. So what we're doing is like once we wrote a new contract, a new protocol, something like that, and we are happy with that, developers will first step back and take some days to conduct a first review of everything, and they won't code anything, and they will just read the code, do like a smart contract review, then fix the things. Then after, we'll push the code to the research team, and then they will do the same process, and this is really effective to find like the first bugs, etc. So these two internal review process, and then after, obviously we're doing audits. In general, we are not taking one auditor because we feel that one, you still have room to have some errors lying on the code, so we'll trigger like the different auditors for the same piece of code. And after, if we are happy with the report and all the fixes, then we can move to the deployment, etc. But as long as we are not happy, we'll not push the thing in production. So that could be a mistake for different protocols, that because you have the money constraints, you also have like the schedule constraints, etc. But I think this is a trap and you should not fall into that. So if there's something wrong, we'll just iterate over and over again until we are happy to and confident that the code that we produced is ready to go.
Yeah, that's great. So you start off with the devs and researchers going back and forth, fixing bugs, etc., and then it moves on to external auditors. What other stakeholders are involved in the whole smart contract development process?
If you take like the whole development process, we have the product team that will like define some specifications. Sometimes developers are also in that process, of course. So we have the product team, we have the research team, and the on-chain team, like the on-chain team writing the contract. We also have the off-chain team that is involved because they will do the interface between like the contract and the dApp that we built. But it's really important that they are aware of all the specification and the features that will bring into the contracts. So we have both stakeholders. We also have liquidators. So usually we're not talking about, but before pushing a new protocol, we'll make sure that we have some different independent team of liquidators that has something working on Morpho, so that if there's like a bad event or whatever, we know that we have like some liquidators that can trigger liquidation on Morpho. We are doing it internally, of course, but we prefer to have like different teams also working on top of Morpho. So we have liquidators. Of course, we have auditors. So for instance, we have a retainer with Superbit. We are super happy with that retainer. And like every 2 months, we have an audit with them and we trigger them on like a different specific part of the protocol or something like that. We have also some contractors that we know well, that are super good at like providing some risk audits, etc. And we ping them just to like improve existing code. Like, can we make that more efficient, or can you check that piece of code which is really tricky? If you find some bugs, let us know.
Got it. Yeah. So external auditors ensure the technical safety of your contracts. And then if we speak a bit about the operational and cybersecurity side of things, are there any admin roles on Morpho?
On Morpho, the current state is like we are using Zodiac, which is part of the safe installation. And so what we have now is like more upgrade. We added a delay a month ago or something like that, so that if we trigger an upgrade, we have like a 24 hours delay before the upgrade is possible. And this is the case for like every touchy governance functions. And we have an operator, which is like a multi-sig 3 or 5 that can trigger pausing functions in case of emergency. That being said, we want to have a smooth decentralization of the protocol. So I think, like, for instance, not for Morpho-AaveV V3 in the short term, but more for Morpho V1, perhaps what we'll do is like increase the delay, perhaps cut some access to governance functions, and smoothly perhaps disable the upgrade mechanism. So I think it would be more like a discussion with the community to if we should do it now or later, because it has some risk concern as well. If you cut the upgradability and to find something in the code, then can't do anything. So you need to migrate the liquidity if you want to save the funds, etc. So it has like many implications to do so.
Got it. And we both know that if we look at hacks in DeFi, one of the leading reasons for them is unfortunately compromised private keys. So that's like a very big vulnerability. This is a more specific question on the admin role things, but I'd be very keen on hearing who at Morpho has these roles and how you approach storing the keys securely to mitigate these risks, to the extent you're able to share, of course.
So it's like some members now of the Morpho Association, some part of the core team at Morpho Labs, but also some like advisors as well, and the person that we know that we trust. I think you can find their names on the Morpho documentation because it's transparent. But and everyone has like a wallet, really good AppSec. I won't tell you because just for security it's better, but we make things securely.
Yeah, good. That was a test. If you would have told me, then that would have been a bad thing. No. The final point, you touched on like a bounty program. So how are you thinking about aligning the economic incentives for all stakeholders?
Yeah, first I think better safe than sorry. So we have like a huge amount of money that is dedicating for security only, and it's pretty impressive what we put on that at Morpho Labs. So I think it's better to have like strong auditors auditing the contract, or at least like taking the time to make sure that the contracts are safe, instead of like pushing everything and say, okay, we have a bug bounty, so we are safe. So I think the bug bounty is like the last resort thing you should have. That being said, now we have like Code Arena or Sherlock that are new model where you put rewards, and there is a contest to have these rewards for like hackers coming and trying to find bugs. In general, the code is not deployed, so I think it's quite different. But those are like new interesting ways of like making contracts safe before deployment.
And speaking about the money that you have allocated to security, are you able to shed light on what your security budget looks like? So how much you're spending and on what?
To be precise, I think it's more than 20% of the total money that we spend that is allocated to security only. So that means audit. And I'm not speaking about like people that we are paying internally to like do some research or security audit internally. So it's not HR expenses.
Okay, so about 20% is spent purely on like external audits, and then the internal amount of resources used is a bit harder to quantify because it's mainly HR costs. Got it. Then let's speak a little bit about the contract design space, which in my head can be split into three kind of high level categories, with number one being immutable contracts, but with mutable fee switches, something like Uniswap. Second, you'd have immutable contracts with many mutable risk parameters in something like Liquidity. And finally, you'd have protocols that are loosely governed by their owners, which I guess you could say is like the multi-sig model. So, what are your general thoughts about these designs, and where does Morpho fit in?
So for now, Morpho is more on the side like mutable contracts with mutable parameters. On the long term, I think most of the team want like immutable contract with some mutable parameters because Morpho you need to have like some parameter management to make it more efficient. This is a fact. I mean, upgradability is a two-side coin. So we have like recent event with Oasis where they could like upgrade the contract and were able to retrieve funds, etc. But at the same time, like it's also like rugging people. And the delay we put in place is to avoid that. Like even if like the team or the DAO is being rugged and wants to steal funds of the users, then there is a delay that cannot be bypassed. And I think this is a good first step, like to ensure that if there is something bad, then users can see it and withdraw their fund before that. But yeah, long term, I think we'll try to cut down upgradability, but after like over time, I guess, for security purposes. And we really in the team, they're huge fan of Uniswap products. Not speaking about the governance, but like the fact that they are using immutable contracts and like it's used kind of product market fit, and it resonates a lot with what we want to do at Morpho.
This has been a really interesting segment, and the first time we've dived into this level of detail on security. So thank you for giving us the answers and shedding some light on these topics. Moving on, just the final question for this interview to preface, hopefully, the next session we can have in another 3 months is that what's next? Morpho-Aave V3 is out. What are the biggest milestones in the mid to long term roadmap?
We have a research team like doing lots of research in like the lending space, and so we are just trying for now to discover new things, and we don't have much to say about it. It's like more an exploratory phase that is ongoing on the research side, and nothing is set in stone. So yeah, no great alpha, I would say.
Yeah, no, that's great. We always love a bit of mystery, and it's good. You guys can put your heads down and find what to focus on.
Yeah, we're quite a team of like stealth guys, and not really good at marketing, not really good at like showing off, but doing our things.
I mean, you need to be good at the research, dev, and product side of things to build a good product. And at the moment, your numbers speak for yourselves. You can build out the marketing department at a later point.
What I would say is like I think we are risk takers for like product vision and product orientation, but we are really risk averse in terms of like product implementation. I think it's how I could sum Morpho-Labs.
That's a really great quote, and I'm going to clip that and make sure to share that. I think it's also a good note to end on. Thank you so much, Merlin, for this overview of the latest at Morpho and also your internal security stuff. It was really great to chat.
Yeah, thank you, Oscar. That was good.